Please give a warm Georgia Tech welcome to our guest, Steven Carse.
Woo-hoo! I hit the on button, but can everybody hear me? Okay? Is it playing? Okay. Cool. Thank you for the nice introduction. I don't do a ton of speaking, and it might become evident as we go through this, but I'm going to try my darndest. And a few things that I'm going to say as we go through this are obviously for dramatic effect, and I'm going to say them in absolutes, but you're all Georgia Tech, or maybe not, I don't know, people that are at least in the building of Georgia Tech at this moment. And so while they're for dramatic effect, remember that I started a popsicle company that's done fairly well. For example, I was just giving some trademark advice to this gentleman in the front row, and I'm not sure it was very sound advice. So as I'm going through this, just kind of remember that. When we started King of Pops, it was really just for a story. I had been at AIG, which is a big insurance company, and I'd been there for about 2.5 years and got laid off during the financial crisis, is what they call it. And I didn't want to just jump right back into insurance. I kind of felt like insurance would probably be there for a while, and I wanted to try something different. And I come from a family of great storytellers, and I was thinking, like, when I'm a grandfather, if I ever am a grandfather, how am I going to just talk to people about, like, well, I had one insurance job, and I got laid off, and I had another insurance job, and that one went pretty good, and I had this other insurance job. So when I got laid off, it was the perfect opportunity for me to try something. I was 25 years old. I'd saved up a little bit of money, and like I said, I just really wanted to have a story to tell. So the ceiling of what my expectations was to create said story. I wasn't trying to be in 7 cities, which is how far we've reached at this point, to employ up to 150 people kind of in the middle of our season. My goal was just to sell a few pops, really, and I did the math, which was the extent of my business plan, and in order to make the business work, I was able to rent my condo out that I had bought when I had a pretty good salary at AIG, and I moved onto my brother's couch. I'm kind of messing up my slides later, so just picture this couch. And I moved onto the couch, and I had done the math that I really only had to sell about 50 to 100 pops on like a Friday, and maybe like 100 pops on a Saturday. And they're $250 each, and then maybe another 100 pops if sold any on Sunday. That'd be like my bonus money. So I needed to make like $400 or $500 a week. And it just seemed super approachable. And that's where we started, with a lot of support. And really, everyone that was around me, it was the middle of winter when we started, and they were so tired of just hearing me talk about popsicles. I'm going to show you a few of the kind of behind-the-scenes early photos to get a sense of kind of what was going on. This is the first one. You can see this guy's really tired of me talking about King of Pops. These are a few of the ingredients. Obviously didn't have a big idea of what I was really doing. Was cooking some things down, was mixing some things up. I didn't speak very good Spanish, so this story that in the introduction, I was inspired by the Latin American, the paleta, which is really popular in Mexico and kind of popular throughout Latin America. But without speaking good Spanish, I was really just kind of like inferring things from looking at the different flavors and really just getting inspired by the concept. So these were my first batch. Got a few flavors in there. I don't have tangerine basil here, but I do have banana pudding, which we still make today. And then some of like the basic ones that you would expect, like strawberries and cream and stuff. So this is how it started. Just kind of this idea that I wanted to do something a little bit different. Certainly hadn't thought 100% through it, but wanted to create a story and wanted to kind of share an idea that I thought was great with people. To go into a little bit more detail about what the paleta is, the popsicles that I grew up on and kind of the ones you see throughout much of the grocery store aisle are good for what they are, but typically made of sweeteners that aren't as good for you, oftentimes like high fructose corn syrup, a lot of artificial flavoring, and that you can just kind of tell by the names when you buy something. If the name is Bomb Pop, which I happen to love, there's nothing in that that's like anything other than the bomb, I guess. It's a really good joke I just did. And so the paleta, the idea is you have really good ingredients, you have natural flavors, you have interesting flavors, and the really beautiful part about the business model and how it started with what really caught my eye is at the farmers markets in Mexico, where it's just kind of like a part of their everyday life. Here, farmers markets can be a part of a lot of people's lives, but they're also kind of like an event and a little bit of a novelty. The fruit, there's tons of farmers, and when they're there to sell their fruit and it's kind of going bad, oftentimes what happens here is it gets thrown away. What happens there is each of these markets has a paleta maker. My Spanish is bad, like I said, but they're generally called a paletero. And they would turn this almost waste, 2 or 3 days away from being waste, into something that was an added value product. So something that in 2 to 3 days was going to be maybe going in the trash was then reinvented, mixed with something else, and had at least a 2, 3, maybe even 4-week shelf life added to it. So I fell in love with that idea, started trying to make my own, and this is that couch I was talking to. Maybe I was subconsciously trying to avoid it because of the blanket that I have up there. I went to the University of Georgia, as I was going to say in my introduction, and I was a journalism major. So when I finished journalism school, before I got my job at AIG, I went out to Idaho. I wrote for a newspaper out there for about a year, and I talked to a few people before this, and I just kind of remember being in college and being like, man, what the hell am I going to do? You just don't really know. I was a journalism major. I was pretty damn sure I was going to be a writer, sorry. And so I moved to Idaho. Wasn't really like anything that I ever dreamed of. Idaho, I'd never been. Had a good time out there, but quickly found out that the future wasn't really there in the way that I had dreamed of. At the same time, wasn't really getting paid very much. So my brother got me a job at AIG, kind of skipping around there. Get laid off, try to make a few of those pops that we went to in the winter, and then flop down on this couch. So I moved out of my condo, I moved onto this couch. This is one of the reasons why I was able to sell so few pops in the beginning, because I had an amazing brother and overall support system that kind of helped me along the way. I think that's really important. And I was very lucky to have that. When we moved onto the couch, it was January. It was just me. I don't know why I just said we. You try to say we a lot in business because you really want to deflect credit, and that's a thing that I truly believe in. It is all a we. We've done a lot of good stuff, but we actually didn't move onto the couch, just me. In that situation. So here is this is my good friend Chris Vegas, kind of like the couch that I lived on. He helped me paint this thing. He's an amazing artist. It was January of 2010, not the best time to start a popsicle business. So we were like, well, what are we going to do? Let's paint this mural. So the mural gets finished. It's late January at this point. We're like, shaking hands. We did that. And people were still just really confused. They're like, what is this? And Michael Jackson had died a few months or maybe 9 months before, so people thought it was a strange joke or homage to the true king of pop. But really, this was genius, and people talked to us a lot about it, both when we were painting it, and then there were blogs that were writing about this before we had even set up our first cart. So this next slide is my biggest piece of advice. When we were doing this, I was simultaneously working on our first store. It was going to be a brick and mortar store at the North Avenue and North Highland intersection. We still have a cart set up there today. And they've got a small out shop that used to be a florist, and I've heard a bunch of stories about it, what it has historically been. Right now it's an emissions place, if you've been there recently. But I envisioned this being like a little pop shop. As I was going through the red tape and trying to figure it out, all of which was new to me, I realized that you needed a grease trap to do this. And my savings from AIG was $10,000. The grease trap was $15,000. In addition to that, the one piece of equipment that I did learn in my travels in Mexico was very important was like a popsicle maker. It's about the size of this podium, and it essentially freezes the product really fast. We don't have any secrets. Like if you want to know the recipe of any of the pops, you can generally look on the wrapper and see the ingredients, and it'll say like strawberry, lemons, sugar. That's what's in that one, and you mix them together. So that's a secret for you guys. But there is one secret that isn't a secret, because I'm going to tell you that these pop machines, what they do is they make your product like an amateur. You can make a pretty good pop at home with the same ingredients and put it in your freezer, and it's going to taste pretty good. But ours should taste better because of this piece of equipment, and what it does is freezes the pops really fast. And when you freeze something fast, the ice crystals are smaller. They freeze faster and has a smaller ice crystal. So a large ice crystal, which is what happens if you freeze it really slow in your home freezer, is when it kind of tastes icy and a little bit more grainy. And then mouthfeel, which is like an industry term, if you have a really small ice crystal, is much better. So I could kind of choose. I could have tried to borrow $5,000 and have a grease trap and make kind of a substandard product, or I could spend $7,000, buy this machine from Argentina, and kind of figure out the rest. I didn't want to put out a bad product, so I decided we'd have to figure out how we were going to do this. And the advice, which is on the slide behind me, is pick a date. And I don't think that, given the circumstances, if I wouldn't have set a date, which was April 1st, when I was kind of painting murals and hanging out on the couch and kind of enjoying this conversational entrepreneur life that involved really no work, I think I might have just said, oh man, I don't know what to do. This stinks. But I had committed to a date of April 1st, so when that fell through, I scrambled and I found a shared kitchen, and I got the machine. We only have 30 minutes, so I can't tell you that story, but essentially, machine didn't come from Argentina, ended up having to drive to San Antonio to get used machine, ended up working out good. Started the business. Because I had picked this date on this one corner, I was able to talk the gas station owners into still letting me set up there. And when you pick a date, it's kind of a good thing, because like you release what you're working on out into the world. Oftentimes we think we can continue to tweak and perfect and make something absolutely perfect. But when things are in your head, you're only dealing with one person, no matter how many conversations you're having. So putting it out into the world really helped. On the flip side, there were some imperfections. So this was my first cart. You can see it is not very nice. I was hoping there would be like a laugh, but maybe you were just being polite. I was set up here behind this telephone pole because that was where my shade was, and I would just kind of follow it around like a clock. And in this picture, it looks like I'm waiting on a phone call from this payphone, which no longer exists. In addition, my umbrella, green at the time, was much smaller, and the chalkboard just kind of thrown together. And while our presentation now, you saw it outside, so it's not like, I don't know, Dean and DeLuca or something. It looks a little bit better. Thanks, Andre. So my advice on this would be embrace, rats. All right, back to this one. Let's pretend like, basically what I wanted to say with this slide, and it's not going to be a smooth transition as we've all learned, is that I learned very quickly within about 3 months after starting that there are not people that are like, even if they are smarter than you, I was going to say nobody's smarter than you in a room. There might be, most of you guys are technically smarter than me in this room, I would think, but it kind of doesn't matter. And if you operate with that mentality and you go through things with an idea of wanting to figure it out and being open to figuring it out and asking questions, I truly believe that your IQ is not the biggest advantage that you could have. It's working hard and being open to kind of trying to do new things and pushing yourself, really. So just pop that in there. And then back to embrace your mistakes. So we wouldn't have done a lot of the stuff that we did the way we did if things had worked out as we wanted. We were hoping to have a popsicle shop in a single location. And what happened was I was forced to get a cart and kind of roll with the punches. And what happened with the cart, which is obviously now our entire business is we were able to go to tons of places. It seems like a simple idea, but I truly believe if we would have just had the single brick and mortar store, we would have never done that. In addition to that, what that encouraged us to do is like, how are we going to tell people where we are? Social media, which everyone understands what that is, was not quite as ingrained in culture in 2010, and it was kind of novel to post on Twitter and Facebook where you were going to be set up. And people were excited to use this new tool for an actual reason. So we started to post everywhere that we were, and people would just show up. And we were selling more than we ever imagined. Pretty quickly on, about 3 months in, I had to, I needed help. I had a lot of help already, but I wasn't able to kind of keep up with all of the work. So I asked my brother, who had already been helping me, so nice to let me use his couch. He had been helping me at night when he wasn't at work. He was a lawyer. I asked him if he wanted to join. I was like, 50-50 if you want to do this, but this is kind of the one shot. Once we go any further from here, you would just be in a different situation. Who knows what it would have been. So he joined. He quit his job as a lawyer, which was obviously a big risk. He kept the note that my dad wrote him telling him how terrible of an idea that was. My dad actually is several times retired, but currently works for us. Gave him a high five on the way out the door before I came here. So we're all good now. But I guess the point of this slide is embrace mistakes in the sense that you don't really know exactly what's going to work the best. Put things out into the world and embrace the mistakes that happen and go with it. Because once things are in the world, interesting stuff's going to happen. So this is my brother. This is me. This is our non-Dean and DeLuca setup that we like a lot. But and I love the authenticity of it, and I love the way it looks. And I think if we would have paid like a branding firm to come up with a look for us, we did have a designer friend help us with the logo, but they wouldn't have been able to really create this. For example, the umbrella, which is like a big part of our brand now, was literally just the only thing that was in stock one time when we went to Walmart. And we realized this is working great, and we just kept buying more and more and more of them because we realized after we had just done it out of necessity that it was working. And if we had had a business plan for 4 years and then sourced 400 umbrellas and had a startup fund, we wouldn't have probably ever had a rainbow umbrella, which I happen to really like. The next part of what we're going to talk about is telling your story. It's the one thing that I'm constantly working on. I want everything that we're saying to be relatively interesting. So like the story when we started was about myself getting laid off, Nick quitting work. Our story that we have now is more about we started a farm in order to grow some of our own ingredients and really to teach about the importance of sustainable agriculture. We have a yoga event that we have a ton of people come out to every Tuesday, although yesterday was the last one, so don't come next Tuesday. We try to, instead of having a large marketing budget or an advertising spend, we try to spend money on things that keep us kind of interesting. I'm running short on time, but this is just an example of how to not take yourself seriously. And it's a popular internet phenomenon that I know not many of you have seen because it's only gotten 143 views. So whenever I do a talk, I just always show it. But can anyone guess what it might be just because of their strength of reasoning? All right, let's see. I wish it was a little louder. Just imagine that it's louder. So I think this is kind of what we did in the winter, with the first winter when we didn't have anything to sell. But I do think doing something and having a story and having something to put out there is something that I would always advise people to do. Just keep throwing things out there and pushing yourself to have a story. And then the last one, which I personally get the most out of, is to be a part of the community. I would hope that if you start a business in some sense, whether it is direct in like speaking to people like this or hosting a yoga event like this, or anything really that you feel like is good for the community, you'll always be putting your own spin on it. I hope whenever you're starting a business that's somewhere in the back of your head. I 100% believe that if you're starting it for the reason to start a successful business, that you're already behind. I think you have to have a reason why you want to do it, and it might not be tied directly to what you're thinking right now. Like popsicles and community kind of go hand in hand, and they kind of don't. And it's evolved into something that I'm really, really proud of. So I think that this has been about the right amount of time. Is that correct? Yeah. So with that, I always like to end with a note of positivity. I know we've got like a lot of uncertain times coming up, and I would just always encourage people to, first of all, do what you're dreaming of. I would just say, like when I started this, oftentimes when we look at risk, we think of the absolute worst that can happen, and you kind of are like, well, I could lose my house, and my leg could fall off, and all this could happen. But the reality is that's not going to happen, and what we don't actually think about is what the best thing is that could happen. Because I know when I started, like I was talking about in the beginning, I was trying to sell 200 pops and have a story to tell, and what ended up happening is I have a business where I work with 50, 100 of people that I truly love, and I get up from work every day and love coming in and proud of things that are so much bigger than me at this point. And those are things that I never would have actually imagined. I guess I would encourage you to consider the bad things that could happen, but understand that the good things are oftentimes so much greater than you ever could imagine. And hopefully that'll be a motivation for you guys to go out there and do some really cool stuff, which I'm sure you all will. Thanks.
Okay, we're going to kick it off with a question and answer series right now. My first question for you is, so I know you mentioned sustainable farming and yoga in the park and other initiatives that King of Pops is focusing on. What else do you think the future holds?
Oh, man. Well, I'm interested in starting a King of Pops surf camp, which I've been thinking through lately, with the idea being kind of like simultaneously business training and a place for in January, February when our employees have less work to do, and maybe they can go out there and hang out. That's just kind of selfish and the most recent thing that I'm thinking of. Let's see. I think every day we're trying to do something. So we're working on our King of Pops field day right now. And what's important to me about the field day, which is November 6th from noon to 7 at Dad's Garage, if any of you guys would like to attend, there are free pops, much like this talk, is involving just a lot of people from the community. The idea of doing things that are good is one of the, you can sit in your bed, lay in your bed at night or in the morning, and when you really try to think of it, which if it's something you're passionate about, which I am, it can make your head hurt. And I think those moments when your head hurts, whether you're trying to think of what you can do for the community or what the best idea for your business is kind of where the work needs to be happening. So my head's hurting kind of right now because the answer that I provided wasn't great, but I think it's the best I can come up with right now. So hopefully, let's keep the party rolling. All right.
Hi, my name is Demi, and my question was, at what point did you decide that this was a viable career for you? Like, hopefully before you asked your brother, who was a lawyer, to quit his job, but when did you think this was something that could actually be relatively big and be able to live off of?
It's a good question. I would say, if I'm 100% honest, Nick and I, much like myself, when I was just me, how many pops I need to sell, I can remember where we were. We were in a market, in the Atlanta farmers market, walking around, calculating how many pops we would need he had a mortgage still, things like that. I wouldn't say that we were 100% confident. We believed in ourselves, and I was lucky because I had a lot of immediate success, really. I mean, 3 or 4 months in, and we were doing pretty well for one person. The first season, I would say I didn't really feel that comfortable, though. We went through the first season. I was really afraid that popsicles are obviously easy to be looked at as a fad. I was really afraid that in like a 3.5 month period that people were just going to forget that we existed, and it was going to kind of be that story that I said. When I really realized I wouldn't say I really was super comfortable that we had a business that I wanted to like start bringing people into. We hired our first 2 employees our second season. They were good friends, which still you're like, he's my friend. He'll give me a little pass. I would say it really was the 3rd year before I believed fully that we had something that could be a very big business. And very big, I guess, is very relative. But yeah, it took a while. Each winter, we basically thought people would forget that it existed, and we were simultaneously worried that ice pops there were a lot of companies like ours popping up, no pun intended, and we thought maybe it was just like a thing that was going to happen for a few years. So I'd say the 3rd season.
I really enjoy your product. My family and I have been eating it for years.
Thank you.
I sort of took a do-it-yourself ethos in a lot of your talk today.
Yeah.
And I was curious, when you began, did you have any culinary or food background at all? And secondly, you spoke of using your story in the overall business plan. Have you had to use that did you even formally have to deal with the business community, like getting a loan when you expanded, or have you kept it all in-house?
Yeah, I can answer that one real quick. No loan, so we never had to pitch to a bank or anything, which was probably nice because a story might not be concrete enough for them. The first question on culinary experience, I don't really have any. My mom and my family is pretty good cooks. I'm actually not a great cook. But my brother, Nick, who's my business partner, is a very good cook. I'm passionate about desserts, which I think helped a lot. And I think I've got, if not the best palate, a lot of ideas of what I think people would get excited about or potentially would get excited about. And it was fairly systematic about trying things. Like I said, part of what we wanted to do was just keep it really simple. We didn't want to have 35 ingredients and use a flamethrower to finish it off or anything like that. So if our idea was to use really good ingredients, put a few really good ingredients in, and kind of, if you're putting 2 to 4 really good ingredients in, you can't mess it up that bad. That was kind of our strategy. But since I've gone to, I guess what might be helpful for the room is, since then I have gotten really passionate about it. I went to Penn State Ice Cream School. I try to do something most winters that's learning based. Some of that now is going a little bit away from direct product focus and more on kind of business leadership type stuff. But I am pretty geeky about desserts and learning in general, so that's been helpful.
Steven, you have a question.
Hi, I was wondering, you mentioned how King of Pops is an ecologically responsible company. Can you expand a bit on how you guys are doing that?
Yeah, several things. Recycling and compost are the way that we take care of the majority of our waste. And I think for a food business, nothing groundbreaking there. I think beyond that, the farm, I think, the farm is how you have an impact bigger than our popsicle business, because if we can make that work, which is going to be a trying thing, I think it should and could be an example of something pretty special. So I think that's the vision piece of the ecological sustainability, and then the practical part is really pretty simple. It's just annoying. People just don't want to compost their stuff because it can cost more, and sometimes it doesn't even cost more. Sometimes it's just I don't want to separate stuff or whatever. And then recycling is just another sourcing issue. And then teaching a little bit is important to me.
Hi, I'm just curious, how do you keep your products, excuse the pun, fresh and real? How do you vet your ideas for the new flavors of
Yeah.
products? And do you have maybe specific niches or signature stories attached to it?
To each of the pops, yeah, there's a lot of stories, because I don't know what the opposite word, when you were asking that, I was trying to think of it. Maybe someone can yell it out. I don't know what the opposite of risk averse is. We're that kind of when it comes to developing flavors. So anyone can try to make a flavor if it's a compelling enough reason, I guess, but generally most people can. And And so we're pretty open, much like the story I was telling in the beginning of putting a flavor out there and letting sales and response. If someone's fanatical about a flavor or a group is fanatical about it, that's one that we'll really see if it has legs and maybe put it in a few more spots, then a few more spots after that. The stories all have the pops all have a lot of good stories. A lot of people take credit for a lot of stuff. A lot of people have fun with coming up with names that we kind of just never use. But yeah, they've all got some stories. Sorry.
Okay, Steven, we're over here.
Yeah.
I just have two pretty basic questions. One, where was your mural? Because obviously you can't just paint anywhere randomly. So how did you get that space that generated the buzz? And two, how did you store all of your pops when you're living at your brother's? Where was the...
Good question. So similar to the trademark advice I gave earlier, our mural is no longer in existence for probably the reason that you're considering right now. We considered it a mural. They considered it a sign, which is a very big distinction. We had the property owner gave us permission to do it. We actually got caught when the gas station we were at changed from a Citgo to a Chevron. The sign inspector had to come out for that. And whenever the sign inspector comes out, which there's like 2 for the city, they have to inspect the whole property, and then they saw ours. There is a lot of illegal signage, though. Let me just let you know that. We're not the bad guy here. And then when it comes to, what was the second question?
Where did you freeze your first...
Oh yeah, so we had a shared kitchen. So when we were like testing in the winter, I didn't have a shared kitchen, and there wasn't really very much to store. They were like medicine sized. But once we started selling on the streets, we had a shared kitchen and an agriculture permit. That is, food safety is something that's a little bit, I take that more seriously.
Got a question at the back there.
Thanks for coming today. So you guys have been very successful in terms of your growth so far since you started. What's the plan going forward? Are you just going to continue that organic growth, or are you trying to be nationwide, or do you think that would sacrifice on quality? So what's the plan forward?
Yeah, for sure. I would encourage you guys to look up the company called Zingerman's if you're not familiar with them, if they're not like a business model you're studying. We went to a visioning course of theirs 3 years ago and wrote a vision for our company for 2030. A lot of different ideas flew around, but at the end of the day, we decided we wanted to stay in the South because, like I was saying before, we want to be a local food influencer, both for sustainability and for just making a great product and kind of being known for it. So I think that works well, but it does cap us. Obviously, we're not going to be in New York or LA. But I do think what changes is if we were nationwide, we have people that get off an airplane, and when they land, they take their friend or their family member to King of Pops because they can't get it where they're from. So my aspirations and the company's aspirations aren't to get as big as possible. We want to affect a lot of, our purpose is to create unexpected moments of happiness. So we want to make people laugh, we want to make people smile, we want to surprise people in a lot of different ways, and we have to be a community player in order to do that.
Steven, question here.
Hey, Steven. So I recently had the opportunity to try your bear trap flavored pop tail at Pond City Market, and my life was pretty much changed.
Well, that's good.
It was incredible. But I wanted to ask you, like, where do you see yourself? Where do you see King of Pops going in the like alcoholic pops industry?
So interesting question. Well, good question. We do sell alcohol there, and as you noticed, they're separate, and you put the pop in. In each state has such different laws. So, for example, we started a bar similar to that in South Carolina, and there we can make alcohol-infused pops. At Pond City Market, that space is so small that we'd have to actually make them behind the bar on the property. I've gone back and forth. There's obviously a lot of money there. I wouldn't say I get the most excited about the idea. I think it's, a lot of people would like it, but I mean, popsicles can be gimmicky enough. Putting alcohol in them seems like another level of gimmicky. But I don't know. I hope this is recorded, so in 3 years we might be doing it. I have no idea. And yeah.
Hey, Atlanta native here as well. I know that Atlanta has kind of a history of disincentivizing street vendors. especially to,
Yeah.
prop up support for restaurants. How are you able to get around some of those barriers early on?
Yeah. So one thing I guess I'm proud of as far as, I don't know if it's even legislation change, but we were, along with Yumby, kind of pushing this forward. We had got private property vending was a pretty big gray area, and that's how we were operating, luckily. And we had an agriculture permit, so we were on one single location that we could get permission from. The food trucks are the issue because they're trying to cook on site and they're moving. That being said, we're pretty passionate and wanted to kind of be helpful with that. Certainly something I'm not like excited about, and I can understand both sides. I think there has slowed any momentum on it, really. I think for a couple years there was a lot of momentum, and they started testing some routes and a few different things, and I don't think there's as, maybe it's a response to just public demand, there's less momentum. I think it's a beautiful thing because it allows kind of the streets to come alive, and obviously the other side of it is that business owners paying property tax for that street to come alive by their restaurant, and they want to sell to those people. So I think there should be probably like a way that they could figure it out, some type of tax that somehow offset their property tax, but I'm not a politician.
Steven, a couple more questions.
I'm loving this. Keep it going.
Steven, thank you for coming to Georgia Tech. And what I wanted to ask you is that, so in order for your idea and the vision to be a reality right now, you've obviously put in a lot of work and motivation. But what I'm wondering is that when you're in that self-starting entrepreneurship environment, it's really hard to keep your motivation going and to keep yourself accountable. So I was wondering how you did that and how you see yourself, like kind of keeping yourself accountable moving forward and growing your business.
Good question. I mean, as far as like a doing the work standpoint, like my personal experience is that I kind of, maybe it's because I kind of had this winter off mentality and like a squirrel saving acorns that it wasn't a problem. But I never had a problem like motivating myself during that time, and it was endless amounts of super hard work. I guess now what motivates me is just like, I feel like I've been so lucky to be given this opportunity, and I'd be letting a lot of people down if we didn't do everything that we could to do our absolute best. So I don't think that 100% answers your question, but I haven't really struggled with that exactly. I've always felt pretty excited about it. Kind of the idea, like the first time you sell something that you made, you hand it to them and you look at it and they pay you money and you're kind of like, what the heck are you doing, man? You're paying $250 for that at the time. And then it keeps going, and still today, like when I hand somebody something, I get a rush, like with the idea that they're paying money for it, and maybe that's just something that's innate within me. And but I want to just build a great business, and keeps me going.
So, thanks again for your talk. Thanks for the King of Pop.
Yeah,
Loved
thanks.
it.
Thank the sponsor.
Cool. So you talked about getting out of Atlanta and creating that, I guess, sort of culture around King of Pops outside of the city.
Yeah.
I saw that you guys had a deal with Delta Airlines. How did that deal come about? What does it look like?
I think one thing that big companies are looking for now is a way to capture a small piece of what we have. So we want like their gigantic marketing budgets. They want to be able to communicate to a tribe of people that really love a brand. So it's a balance of, do we want to feel like we're selling out or not? And they were a great partner and paid for the product, and all they wanted to do was to do something nice for Atlanta. And you kind of, it's brilliant marketing because you're talking about it right now. But yeah, the way the deal worked is we had a contact there. It started much smaller last year on a single day. Went pretty well, but the spend for them was like $4,000, which is a great amount for us, but for Delta, that's like you going to Australia or something, one person. So not a big deal to them. And then they had a pretty good response to that, and we just pushed them and kept asking them, and now they did it for the entire month of July. Just in Atlanta, now what I'm pushing them for, if there's any Delta employees, is to do it for all the South, which seems like it makes sense to me. But that's kind of how the deal happened, pretty organically.
Steven, question.
Hey, so to get some perspective for like
Yeah.
a small organization moving to like the growth that you guys have experienced,
Yeah.
how has your role changed from day one to now? And like, what is your specific role today, or do you have any boundaries? Are you involved with everything still?
Oh, nope, I'm not involved in everything, which is important, I think, as you scale. Hire people that are better than you at things. So we've actively tried to do that and put people in seats that are a good fit for them. My day is, it's like I said, I'm very lucky, is to think a lot about like where should the company go and how are we going to get there. And that's a really fun job. And then a lot of work of things falling through the cracks and things like that. I deal with kind of like the big picture going forward and a lot of like the culture and team. And it's fairly abstract at times, which is kind of hard. Sometimes it's easier to wake up and say, I got to make 1,000 popsicles today. And when I check that off, my day is complete. One thing I kind of struggle with now is like, how, like the first question, how are we going to make the community better? It's a pretty hard one to check off at the end of the day. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Steven, two more.
Yeah.
And thanks for doing this, and thanks for doing all the other stuff that you were involved here at Georgia Tech. We just kind of forget you from UGA, so we're going to continue to involve you. Two questions. One, it sounds like everything was relatively easy, but I'm sure there were some maybe initiatives that didn't pan out. Can you talk about some of kind of, not necessarily epic, but failures that happened? I heard there was like a Christmas tree delivery or something. Can you talk about initiatives that didn't work out so great? And then can you talk a little bit about the team? Because those are the guys and girls that we see everywhere. So kind of how is that? Who is your team? How do you work with them?
I forget the second question by the time I finish the first one, but let's get right back into it.
I'll remind you.
Yeah. It was really, really hard. So I hope I didn't make anything sound like it was easy, because nothing was easy at all. To give you a brief glimpse into the first few years, my brother and I had something called summer weight. I weigh about 195 pounds, and through the middle of popsicle season, we would hit summer weight, which was about 30, 35 pounds less. I also had an aversion to dry ice, so when I would, which you have to use a lot if you don't have like a cooled cart, and I was handling it for hours and hours, and so I developed like some pretty bad rashes, and I was handing like gourmet pops out and then like sneaking my hand behind my back. So it was really, really hard work. I think hopefully you guys have heard that from a lot of people, that nothing worth doing comes easy. Failures, there's plenty. We focus on some of the good things. It goes from flavors like fig, orange goat cheese or something, I think we've made before. We made a terrible avocado one recently, avocado fennel. But some of the bigger failures have, much like this, if you keep pushing it, morph into something really cool. Tree Elves, when we started along this ecological sustainability kick, was a business that we saw in California, thought it made a lot of sense here, which was a Christmas tree live Christmas tree delivery business. We've got the trucks, we've got employees that need work in the winter, and they have like this 300-pound root ball connected to it. And we didn't really know anything about trees, and it was September, and I was telling you guys how I was kind of just worried about the winter in general, and once you have a few employees, you worry even more. So we decided to deliver these live Christmas trees, and they're just, aside from being back-breakingly heavy, they were also kind of damaging some people's floors by being too heavy. There was like some watering issues. Most of the trees were, you'd water them too much, not enough. They'd be by a heater. I don't even know. I'm not an arborist. All this stuff was going wrong. And it felt even worse because we had developed a tribe of people that really loved King of Pops. And we were like, you develop trust. And so they trusted us. And we sold them a product that was, for all practical purposes, bad. We did what we could to make it right. We tried to shift the business. We tried another year of live trees just with a year of experience. Similar issues like painstakingly terrible feeling stuff. Like giving someone a bad popsicle, I was telling you how nervous I kind of feel about that. I get over it pretty fast. If you get an email of like ruining baby's first Christmas, it sits with you a little while. So continued to adjust the Christmas trees, didn't want to give up. And now we do cut trees from a great farm, like the nicest Christmas tree you can really buy. We compost it out at our farm, and it's now a pretty successful business, treeelves.net, if you want to get a Christmas tree delivered to you. And yeah, I'm pretty proud of that. But yeah, it's still an example of like really epic failure and then deciding if you want to throw in the towel, which would have been not a bad decision in a lot of respects, or keep working at it, which we chose to do with that one.
Last question, Steven.
Actually, two.
Yes. Oh, did I answer both yours?
Oh, yeah, team.
Oh, the team.
Yeah.
I'll just say quickly, the team is everything. Like literally the vendors, the people making the pops are beyond any amount of like you can't compensate people for doing something well. Like there's not a market value for it and loving what they do, and it takes a lot of work, but then hopefully it's like a little bit of like this person calls their two friends and they love it, and then you try to cultivate it, and it's like the most precious thing that we have. So talking about what I do, a lot of what I'm trying to do, which I need to do always better at, is like cultivating that team and making sure they're as happy as can be. But team's everything for sure.
Well, I like pops in the winter too.
Yeah?
You know, good pops. So,
Good.
you know, just go on out there. But
Go to Whole Foods. We got them all winter.
part of being good in the community is being good to your employees, and
For sure.
as you scale, how you know, it's not like just the agricultural regulations. It's, you know, how do you engage the people who work with you? You know, it's going deeper into that team question.
Yeah.
How do you attract, develop,
Yeah.
you know, engage,
Yeah.
fully engage them and reward them?
Yeah.
And and then after you answer that, I'll ask the last question.
Okay, cool. I would say like if there's a single thing that kind of keeps me up at night, it is basically that. And the thing that I feel like I guess worst about is we have this committed group that we've developed that love us and we love them. And then that's why we stuck with the Tree Elves thing, and the winter is just a super stressful, puts a lot of weight on my shoulders. I think that kind of goes along with what I personally do is, although I might not be in the kitchen as much or on the cart as much, I try to be even if I right next to people as I can be. And sometimes that's just walking around, and it's usually not business related. It's usually walking next to somebody and being approachable. I try really hard to do that. As far as like strategy, I don't think that we can compete on a lot of the traditional benefits right now. Hopefully in another couple years we can. So we try to create fun things that we can do that a lot of the people that work there are friends, both they never met and now are friends outside of the work. I think that's pretty valuable. But I don't know, that's the million-dollar question, is how do you continuously make something interesting and fulfilling and pay people well. I think caring is probably a good start, and being right next to them and telling them that you care, even if you can't make it right that moment.
That's really great. I want to come do pops. But the other question is, I just sort of see this tension growing with your popularity and your unwillingness to scale quickly or really far. And I just see this saying, no, you're not moving,
Yeah.
really enticing a Unilever, you know, that
Yeah.
has a Ben and
For sure.
Jerry's.
They own the popsicle
word. You know, they want you. If they don't want you already, they
Yeah.
they want you. You know, a Coca-Cola. How does, when does the principles that you have, run out when you have those kinds of interests that will be more and more at your door?
I can't say like how I will respond in a situation that I haven't been in. No one's tried to buy us, but I have told people that are like kind of feelers that I'm not interested. And I think kind of like what I was saying in the beginning, like I don't think if there was something that I wanted to do with a couple $1 million that I thought was more fulfilling or could do more good than this, then I would. But I know it's not. I somehow feel pretty comfortable that it's not going to help what I'm doing that much. Like I moved back into the condo that I had before off of the couch. I don't still live on the couch, but I would love to say and do that what happens with the money that as we grow and get a little bit more successful, we're able to do more for the community and more for the employees, and that's my dream. What happens when someone says, but we'll give $5 million to some nonprofit here and give you $5 million? Like, I don't really know. It's impossible to know, but it's not. We wrote a vision, which I really, really believe in, and it doesn't have to do with growing as fast as we can. I mean, in a lot of ways, we've built a company that the only thing valuable to a bigger company is the name. Like our assets and kind of our processes aren't. We have kitchens in several cities, which isn't very efficient. The way we have those cities set up, I have some intentional inefficiencies that we think help with product and people being connected to the product. But I don't know. I mean, I hope that I can do this my whole life, I guess, is the real answer. And so whether that involves a lot of money or we go back to the corner selling a few hundred pops, that'd be cool too. Like, I just hope that we can keep doing it and have more people do it. Like the part that is beautiful, going back to the employees, is like creating opportunities for people that are doing good stuff. And I really love that.
Thank you so much for coming, Steven, and sharing your story.
Thank you, everybody.